Hi everyone, welcome to IB Psychology. My name is Sandy Gardner. I want to welcome you all. Hopefully I can answer your questions. I'm so sorry we weren't able to meet in person again this year. But again, if you have any questions, I'll give you my information at the end. Super excited to teach your kids. They're all wonderful and have been very involved in discussion and loving the content so far. So let's get into it and I'll tell you what you need to know about IB. First of all, a little something about myself. This is my family. I actually grew up in New Hampshire and have a sister that lives in Colorado and is moving to Arizona. I have a nephew that lives in Paris. And which is really cool because we love to travel. As you can see, we're there at Arches and the Golden Gate Bridge in California. I have two children myself. I have a sophomore, so I understand the high school navigation and so forth, and I also have a seventh grader at Clay. My kids are into sports. My daughter plays for the JV team here at Carmel for soccer, and my son's on the tennis team for Clay. So we love to be involved in our community and our school. Growing up, I was a sports person also. I danced. I was also student body president, and I talk with the kids about the fact that I did a lot of charity and volunteer work, especially through psychology. And then I was one that had to really work for my grades. They never came easy, but always wanted to be a teacher. At one point, wanted to be a shuttle pilot. Don't know how that equates to what I'm teaching now, but I definitely wanted to be a teacher all the way back into high school. And so my degree is in social science and social studies teaching, but I have a minor in psychology and have done a lot of internships and work in the psychological field. So I love that. I used to teach IB history as well. And now I've shifted all into psychology. So I love history and know the IB world very well. I've been here at Carmel for 9 years, but I've been in education for 24. So I know my way around a little bit. I'm still navigating and I love to learn. So I kind of share that with the kids along with all the places that I've lived. I'm from New Hampshire, lived in Pennsylvania, North Carolina twice, Florida, and now back in Indiana or in Indiana. So, and we love it here and we love Carmel. Okay, so the big question that I get is what's the difference between IB and AP? So with IB, there definitely is less content or different content, and it's definitely more in depth. The kids will see that. It's also thematically based, so they won't have a chapter just on motivation and emotion. That's going to be within one of the themes that I'm going to go over as well. So they're very thematic. They like to think like big picture. And so forth, and so the content is going to be a little bit different. AP, if any of the kids have taken AP psychology, they can take IB psychology, and they're going to get some of the similar information, but some differences in there because we do thematic. There are no multiple choice tests in IB. It's mostly all written and short answer assessments and extended essay questions. So what's really neat about IB is that the kids really get to know how to discuss and they also know how to write. So they get a really good basis for writing in here as well, and we do a lot of practice with that. Questions are more broad and less specific. So on a multiple choice, question, you would get, what's the part of the eye that does transduction so that there's, sensation or whichever from light, and the eye can process that through the brain. That's very specific. We may ask like, what is a one example of transduction that the brain can use to process information. And the kids could pick the eye or they could pick the ear or whichever. So that it gives them a little bit more leeway to show what they know and not be very, very specific on questions, and they get kind of caught on the ones that they don't know. It's also more global. It's an international, that's what IB is, International Baccalaureate. So we do bring in a lot of social cultural. We'll be looking at a book. I'll get into that. It's called Crazy Like Us, and it is in the abnormal psychology section, and it talks about just globally what mental health looks like. So they'll be doing that, and they'll be kind of reaching out and seeing what around the globe psychology looks like. And that's not something that IB or AP does, because that's more of a US-based program. We definitely are focused on skills as well as information, and also on the whole child. This is one of the activities we did when we first came in. The second day we came in, I wanted kids to look at the IB learner profile, and those of you that have kids that are diploma students, like, they already have kind of looked at this, but people who have only taken AP and have never taken an IB class, we kind of go over this. And if you kind of look at the list, there's definitely there with like knowledgeable and being a thinker and being, have natural curiosity for learning. And being a good communicator, but it also has things like open-mindedness and being a risk taker, having balance in life between intellectual, physical, and emotional well-being, being very reflective on your strengths and your weaknesses, being very caring and compassionate, and so forth. So one of the things we do that's a little different from AP is we do some field trips, and we also do some community service. So one of the things we're going to be working on in the next month or so is collecting some items for the backpack program here at CHS, and being more in tune with, the needs of others and what that might look like. So those are some of the things that we're going to do, some community outreach that's a little different from AP as well, because that's part of the IB program. It's something that I find rewarding for the kids and myself, and it's something that the program wants us to do as well. So hopefully that answers that. Also, let's go over the content for the year, and you'll see it is a little bit different. In AP Psych, we go over, 15 chapters. This, we only have some really big units, and you can see they're very thematic. In semester one, right now we're doing unit 1, we're in research and psychology. So they're learning about research techniques, a lot of information and vocab on research that they'll have to apply throughout the entire year as they look at different studies. Right after Unit 1, we're going to start working on our internal assessment. All IB classes have an IA. That's the IA, so the internal assessment. And basically what that is, it's something that will be passed into IB if they're taking the exam. It's one of their components that they play and that they do get to pass in, and it's something they can work on their own. So it's not just sitting for the test, which is what AP would normally do. AP doesn't have an outside paper that you do, but for IB we do. So for this one, they will be getting in groups, and they will be mimicking a research study that's already been done. They will actually collect data from students, get a sample, do that properly, get consent forms, all that kind of stuff to run their experiment. And then after the experiment is done, they'll talk about their data as a group, but then they go off and they write their own paper, and that paper is what they have due this year. I typically like to do my IB IAs and experiments way early. They don't really need to know that much about psychology. They will learn as they go along. As they're writing their rough draft, they're going to be learning all different things, so they can start adding and changing that. But I like to get all that done ahead of time so that they have plenty of time to do really well on that part of the exam. The rough draft for that is going to be due December 1st, and I correct all those and look at all of those and give them feedback. I can only give them very general feedback, but I at least get to look at them and say, you get to look at this section, take a look at the format or the content that you're talking about, and then they have to look back at that. So that's individually done for them, but group for the actual experiment that they write the paper based on. And then after that, we're going to get into Unit 2 as they're writing their rough draft, but we're going to start the experiment right after Unit 1, and then we get into Unit 2, biological basis for behavior. So that's all about genes and the brain and hormones and all that kind of stuff. In Unit 3, we do cognitive basis, so all the thinking process like motivation, emotion, memory is all in that section. And then the last thing we do is social cultural. And we, because I'm the only IB teacher, it's okay if we go into semester 2 and run, and it depends, I like to do some projects, so sometimes those things run a little bit differently based on the kids that I have and the discussions we get in and so forth. So that's semester 1. In semester 2, they're going to finalize their internal assessment as I give those rough drafts back. We might finish up social cultural if we're still, hanging on to that. And then all of second semester is all about clinical, or what I don't like to call abnormal, because disorders are not as abnormal as they used to be, but clinical psychology and also the treatment for that. And that has its own book that's different from the IB book. And then we'll do some test review for the exam, and then the final test. Any final that they have a final for first semester and second semester, is all practice. It's a practice test of IB. Also in the second semester, I'd like to do some field trips to IUPUI, or they have a great psychology department. And also, if we do a little bit on development, taking them over to play with some kids and see the different developmental stages from babies up to 5-year-olds and so forth. So getting a field experience with that. In terms of what you need to know about the class itself and what the kids need to have, I all require them to have a spiral, or they can have a loose leaf notebook, but I give a lot of handouts, so I always have told them to do a spiral. If you can double check to make sure that they have those, that would be really helpful. I do really impress upon them it's their responsibility, but all those notes should be handwritten. There's lots of research that shows that handwritten notes actually make them process the information much better than typing. Students will also receive a monthly calendar. We try to stick to that with reading assignments and tests so they know ahead of time what those are going to look like. That does change. We're already shifting one day and so forth. Their first test was September 8th, but it's probably going to be September 10th. And so I give that up to, so they can sort of plan their month. There are no reading quizzes, which is something typical that does happen, but I tell them it's a college level class, and in college you will not have reading quizzes. And so I expect them to take notes, and I assume that they have read before they get there. I can see that some of them here and there don't at the very beginning, so it'd be really helpful if parents could double check, sort of at the beginning, kind of like get them moving if you don't see that they've got any notes down or have read anything. That is our textbook above me. It is on back order, of course, with all things that can happen in a school year. It is back ordered, and so I'm photocopying pages from the book, and they also have them on Canvas if they lose those. So they are getting that, and we should get it shortly. In terms of grading is going to be calculated by semester again, so those quarter grades are going to represent only a progress report. So I'm doing total points, and some things are worth more than others. Tests are, of course, the most important in terms of points. All of the work is located on Canvas. If they are absent, they're going to want to go onto Canvas, and I just have classwork view here. They can see any notes. If they're in class and they miss some notes, they can go back in and write those into their notebook. So all their work is there, all videos, handouts, things like that I give. Most homework is going to be reading and notes, but here and there I'll give a quiz. I try to give quizzes where they can use their notes. It's totally fine, but have those at home so we can spend more time in class doing the things that I want to do and not, assessing all the time. So that's the way I'll assess them until the test, is those little quizzes at home. And little writing prompts that I'm going to give them. If you look at semester 1, the unit test, you can see they're all 100 points. The research experiment that they're going to do in their groups is 100 points, and the rough draft is also 100 points. So they have about 600 with that. There will be some formative quizzes, like little quizzes that will be, 15, 20 points. Writing prompts, projects range from like 30 to 50 points. So it's not quite a test grade. And then their final exam will be the same weight as a normal test. You won't see 20% for, exam 1 or exam 2 in semester 2. It's just the same as a regular test. For semester 2, they'll have their final IA. That's also 100 points. That's that final draft that I'll grade no matter if they're sending it to IB or not and taking the test. If they're not taking the test, they still have to hand in the IA. It's still a part of the class. And then you'll see some unit tests based on the different disorders and families of disorders. They're all 50 points each. There's more of them, though. And then we'll have a project for each of those, which will be 50. And then the final exam review, no matter if you're taking the exam or not, that's the final, and that's going to be 100. After that, we'll be doing any kinds of things that we want to do with stress and health or developmental things and going on field trips and whatnot before the exam. The exam is May 17th, and the research experiment that they do, they're going to do a group museum exhibit that they have other classes come in and see what they've been doing with their research. In terms of the test itself, and again, this is an IB class, so I know my video is into 15 minutes now, but there's a lot of information to give you in these upper level classes. That registration is going to start October 11th. The kids have already gotten a sheet for that with a QR code to register. It's $130. And that registration runs until November 1st. So you need to decide if your student feels like they want to get some college credit or try to get some college credit. In addition, if they're using this class as in the honors diploma, they have to sit for the exam whether they pass it or not. So you have to register for that in order for them to get credit for that. For semester 1, this is the most important semester. It is what they're going to be tested on. In IB, they don't call them exams, they call them papers. And so paper 1 is that biological, cognitive, and social cultural approach, that thematic approach that I showed you earlier. They will get some questions on that. They get 3 compulsory. There's 3 that they have to answer. It's an hour. They're 200 words each or so, so kind of short. And then part B is more, they get to pick 1 out of 3, and it has more of an applicable sort of extended essay to it. So that's more of a 5-paragraph essay, but not quite, because IB doesn't really go with the American way of writing. So it's more extended, and that's an hour, and that's about 1,000 words. Second semester, usually they are tested on the abnormal or clinical psychology. IB is still doing the COVID modified test. So actually any of second semester, they will not be tested on. I will continue to practice semester 1 skills and content as we go through and do some writing prompts and discussions and things like that, so they don't lose that material. But all of second semester, they really don't get tested on. So that's why I'm not so worried about, finishing up in first semester with that stuff. We really want to know that really well before we move on. So that's the exam. Here's some examples of what that exam would look like. The paper 1, as I said, is section 1. So if you look, they have to answer all those questions. And as I said before, there is, it's more broad. So if you look at, for instance, the cognitive level of analysis, explain how one biological factor can affect one cognitive process. So they can pick any biological factor like genes and then affect one cognitive process like memory or intelligence. And so they can pick whatever they want, and they get to write about that instead of being stuck to something very specific. Now, there is something there, the social cultural level of analysis, distinguish between the concepts of ENIC and EDIC. Well, that is pretty specific. That's something that they should know. Like they're big concepts that they should definitely know. And then if you look at the bottom there, they can choose one of those. And that's where we get our research kind of included in this. So for instance, the number 5, with reference to a relevant study, discuss how and why 2 particular research methods, like experiment, case study, interview, are used on the cognitive level of analysis. So one of the things the kids have to do is remember studies, who's the experimenter in those studies, what was done, and then answer the question in terms of cognitive level. So we go through and pick a lot of studies and try to fit, memorize some studies and what they've done, and they can use those as evidence in their writing. So that's what makes it so much different than AB. If you guys have any questions throughout the year, please let me know. That's my email, my extension. Emails, you can email me at any time. I do answer my emails, at 8 o'clock at night if I'm around them, and if I want to answer them, I will definitely. If there's some kind of emergency, just give me a call and let me know how I can help you. But if you have any other questions, please let me know. But otherwise, have a great year.